thank you all. This is the portion where I will bring in the keynote speaker. But before I bring in the keynote speaker, some housekeeping items. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see a Q&A icon and a chat icon. If you have questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A icon. So our speaker today is Steve Brown. I've known Steve for about 10 years. We were chatting over the weekend. It was at least 10 years when I first engaged him on another speaking circuit. So this is not his first rodeo at Sim Portland. We do share one part-time job in common in our past life. We both worked as disc jockeys, so go figure, right? Prior to running his own consulting practice in Portland, Steve Brown worked as the Intel's chief evangelist and futurist. He recently published his own book called The Innovation Ultimatum, this book over here. And it's how 6 strategies will reshape every business in 2020. I just finished listening to the Audible version of the book, and I'm not getting any commission out of this pitch, but it is packed with all kinds of practical ideas and fascinating insight on how organizations will leverage artificial intelligence, augmented reality, blockchain, the Internet of Things, 5G networks, and autonomous machine. It's well worth the read, and these are some of the things that he's going to cover today. And with that note, please welcome Steve Brown.
Being unmuted is always better, I find, for these types of conversations. So nice to spend some time with you all. Thanks for having me to talk to you this evening. First of all, congratulations to all of the winners of the scholarships. Congratulations. I know that you're all exceptional people, everybody on this call, but congratulations to those winners. And thank you, Pradeep, for inviting me to be part of this evening. It's been great to have this ongoing relationship with Sim Portland. And I'm proud to be part of that program. I think you do really important work. And so it's a real delight to be here with you this evening. What I wanted to share with you was to talk about something that as a futurist, I'm getting lots of questions about this. I work with clients all over the world, some gigantic corporations, some smaller to medium-sized companies and organizations. It doesn't matter the size of the company or where they are. They're all asking me, what does the future of work look like, Steve? And particularly as we start to think about the post-COVID era, let's hope that such a thing exists, what does the future of work really look like? How will that shape up? And what do we need to, each of us, do to prepare ourselves for that world? So that's what I thought might be useful for you this evening, particularly for the students who are attending this evening and thinking about what their careers are going to be like. I wanted to give you maybe some inside scoop on where I think the future of work is going and how you might prepare yourself for that. So that's the plan. And the headline, as you can see here on this slide, is I think the future of work is augmented, diverse, and anywhere. And I'll explain what I mean by each of those as we go through this. Start off, thank you for the kind introduction, Pradeep. You dropped there that I'm a futurist. I probably should explain what a futurist is, because that's likely to be the #1 question that comes up in Q&A. I get that quite a bit too. So let's just head it off here at the pass. So first of all, I don't sit in a darkened room and smoke peyote and think big thoughts and come up with predictions about the future. That would be a fortune teller or a drug addict. So I don't make predictions. What I do is look at how trends come together. And it's typically technology trends. All of you innately understand that technology is a major disruptive force. So what will technology make possible in a certain time frame? What are the business trends? What new business models are emerging? How does those business pay for that technology? How does technology change business models and products and channel plans? And then perhaps most importantly, what do people want? What are their relationships? What are their aspirations in life? What are their fears? How do they like to work together? What's important to them? And you put all of that together, and that allows you to figure out what will be possible in a certain time frame. So you build I call this possibility landscape. And then as you think about as an organization or as an individual, you're thinking about, okay, there's this landscape. Where do I want to go from here? And that's where I help companies to build these digital innovation plans. And I'll give you some insight into how that works towards the end of this. But thinking about how do I use digital technology to develop new products, to reach people in new ways, to create new business models, to streamline operations, to elevate talent, and help them to be more productive, more creative, and so on. And that's where I want to focus most of my attention this evening is, what does that digital innovation plan look like when it comes to transforming the future? Pradeep, you're muting me. The future of work looks to be augmented, diverse, and anywhere. Let's take those in reverse order. Let's talk about anywhere first.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
And that's my watch trying to talk to me. The joys of fun technology. So anywhere work. I think this is a concept that we're all starting to get more used to in the era of COVID. It's something that people have been talking about for a long time. And it now looks to be a trend that was going to happen anyway, that has been dramatically accelerated as the necessity of COVID and distancing and working from home. You see me here in my home office today. The experience for many of us, as we've been doing anywhere work, remote work, is that it's not a great experience. It's okay. Here we are using Zoom and their webinar service. But yeah, I was watching the chats. People are a little frustrated. They can't all see each other. And tools are not where they need to be. If you think about how tools have improved over time, I guess the 1.0 version of collaboration tools was the text-based stuff. Emails, chat, Slack, those kind of things. The 2.0 version is things that have video capabilities, whether it's Teams or Zoom or pick your video platform of choice. They allow you to see each other. You can see my gestures. You can see my facial expressions. It gives you just a little bit more richness of communication, but it's still missing a lot of capabilities. And if you've sat in hour after hour of Zoom calls or Skype calls or whatever your particular poison is, it can feel like death by video call. So it's still not where it needs to be. It's still not as rich of a communication as being in a room together. So where do things go? What does the 3.0 version of collaboration tools look like? And how will that help us to work from anywhere, work remotely, but do so very effectively? Well, this is the kind of stuff that tech companies are imagining. This ability to use tools like augmented reality, which we'll talk more about later, to help us feel like we share the same physical space. Humans like to come together and to be in the same physical space. It's just part of the way that we're wired, the way that we're built. And so having tools that let us do that and at least experience that sensation is, I think, where things go next, and to allow us to collaborate and solve problems and to brainstorm in ways that are much richer forms of communication than we have with a platform like Zoom today. So if we have those types of tools, that leads us to the question that I get a lot from lots of my clients, and that is this the end of the office building as we know it? Well, there's a lot of conversation about this. I have some friends who work in commercial real estate. They are all crapping themselves, thinking that the commercial real estate market is going to fall apart and be dead for the next decade or two. There's some truth in that, but the answer to the question, is this the end of offices, is a plain no, it's not. But it is certainly going to be true, I think, and certainly the research bears this out, and it's very early research, that we're probably going to move to where the model flips. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that today, well, let's not say today, in the before times, back in January of this year, when people actually continued to go to offices, the default was you went to offices maybe 5 days a week, maybe 4 days a week, and by exception, you work from home. When you needed to go to a doctor's appointment, when you needed to write something and needed some quiet time, when you just, you had a kid sick, that was the exception. And the expectation was you went into the office. That is likely to flip going forward. The default will be people work remotely, and the exception will be that they go in when they need to go into the office for a set of reasons, which will be things related to I need to collaborate with other human beings. It's much more effective to do that in a collaborative environment with whiteboards where I can brainstorm and stickies and whatever it might be. Or just for the social elements of building relationships with coworkers, having fun with coworkers. Remember that? But importantly, the serendipity of running into somebody by the water cooler, in the cafeteria, in the corridor. Hey, did you get that thing I sent you? What do you think about that? And then resolving a problem on the spot. So I don't think offices go away. I think offices may certainly downsize, and you see that already happening. And so you're going to see a lot of turnover in commercial real estate and footprints of offices shrinking, but I don't think the office goes away, and other people who think about this stuff like me agree with that. Much more remote work, but people will still want to come together to achieve the things you see shown on this slide. So this is already happening. It's not just with the tech companies like Twitter and Facebook and Microsoft who've said, hey, you can work from home forever. And I think you'll see a lot more of that coming over the next few months. But even in manufacturing companies, people like Siemens, Fujitsu saying, yeah, for certain of our employees, if you want to work remotely or you want to work remotely for 3 or 4 days a week, absolutely. And so they're downsizing and distributing their work hubs. So it really comes down to all these companies having to ask this question, what is their long-term remote work strategy? So for many of you entering the workforce for the first time, many of us who are in the workforce, it is going to feel different than it has done in the past. There are some big benefits of moving to a remote work model, and it means that leaders need to change the way that they work too. So certainly from a management approach standpoint, managing people based on is their butt in the seat from 8 till 5, which some places still kind of do. No, that's not going to work going forward. You have to start moving to managing on results, which progressive companies made that switch 35 years ago, or maybe more. Some still need to catch up with that. So it means a different approach. It may mean different pay policies. HR departments' heads are going to explode when they have to think about how do I pay people based on being in different parts of the world, and having to think about different cost of living adjustments for everybody. But the benefits here are huge. What it means is that companies will be able to draw from a global talent pool. So not just from the people in the 30 or 40 mile radius of people who are willing to drive that distance to get into work every day. Now they can look at people on a national or international basis and get the very best talent. So you can see more competition for the very best talent. And it's going to give talent the freedom to be wherever they want. And you're already starting to see attractive locations start to compete with each other. So the Bahamas is now giving away, visas, work visas to say, hey, come work here remotely for a year. And I think you're going to see a lot of competition in that realm. From a societal standpoint, this is really good, I think, as well. Rather than concentrating wealth generation into specific urban areas, think Silicon Valley, think perhaps Seattle in the tech realm, but other major cities around the country where you force people to cram together, you jack up house prices, salaries skyrocket. Now, because that's what you have to do to help people afford to live in those cities. Now you could have people in rural areas, in places that are just nicer to live. And now you start to project that wealth generation into those communities. People will spend in those communities, and you start to bring wealth into these smaller rural locations, which can only be a good thing. And for kids growing up in a rural location, if they have aspirations beyond farming, beyond maybe some of the local businesses that live in those rural locations, they now no longer have to flee and go to the cities in search of economic opportunity. As long as they have a high bandwidth connection, they'll be able to work from home. And that's where the first of the 6 technologies that I talk about in my book comes in. This is the low Earth orbit satellite networks that are being built now that will come online starting maybe as early as next year, and then really start to gain traction through the 2020s. So by the end of the decade, it will be possible to connect everything and everyone everywhere on Earth. That means that you'll be able to get access to not quite 5G bandwidth, but 4.5G like connectivity which will allow you to participate in the global economy from anywhere with a laptop and a satellite connection. These are low Earth orbit satellites, so they orbit much closer to the Earth. And it turns out it's much faster to send a signal from a base station up to a satellite, bounce it through the vacuum of space to other satellites, and then down to another base station than it is to send it through a fiber optic cable, for example, under the Atlantic. So this will be paid for largely by the big trading houses, your Goldman Sachs's and so on, that need to get very quick connectivity between their trading desks in New York and London, for example. And then the rest of us get to benefit from it. So this is kind of a big deal. So that's anywhere work. The likelihood is you're going to see a lot more people take advantage of this and decouple themselves from physical spaces and start to think about working from anywhere. That doesn't mean the office dies. There will still be people who want to come together and need to come together for work. And of course, there are whole categories of work which are very physical in nature where this doesn't apply. But it is certainly going to change the nature of work for many of the people who are on this call today. So let's change gears. Let's talk about another dimension of the future of work, which I think is increased diversity in work. What do I mean by that? Of course, diversity in the working population of age, race, gender, orientation, outlook, culture. These are all important to a high functioning workforce and to include everybody in the workforce. But I think, excuse me, there are other aspects to diversity that are going to emerge over time that we should be mindful of, and the benefits of diversity other than checking a box to make sure that the government doesn't get upset with you or shareholders don't get upset with you. What I mean by this is that we need to have far more well-rounded people in order to solve the big problems of the future. To solve the big problems of the future, you're going to need teams of people to come together who have broad ranges of expertise. So there's this notion of T-shaped individuals that has been floating around for a while. This is a person who has broad knowledge in a wide range of topics and then deep knowledge in one specialist subject. And hopefully all of those of you who are students now have been trying to turn yourself into at least a T-shaped person. The reason you need that broad knowledge is to collaborate effectively with other people who have different specialisms than you. You need to be at least able to understand what they're talking about, to appreciate what their knowledge is, and to appreciate and have a conversation with them where you can connect with them and share information. So T-shaped people have been, one of the things, the goals of the educational world. Where we're heading now is more to pie-shaped people. People with broad knowledge in a wide range of topics, but then the ability to go deep in two very different domains of expertise. Now, why is that important? It's important because you need people now to bridge between these two different domains. So think about, for example, the future of healthcare. You need people who not only understand the medical world, but also understand how to build an AI model and train it to solve diagnostic problems in the healthcare world. And people who are able to bridge those two worlds will be incredibly valuable in the workforces of the future. Because solving the big problems that are left to solve, and there are many of them, are complex problems. They're the ones we haven't solved yet because they're difficult. And they're difficult or they were not solvable with the technology that we used to have. So we're going to need complex teams with complex ranges of expertise, all working together, firing all cylinders, working as a high-functioning team to solve these complex problems. If you think about, for example, of trying to build autonomous vehicles, so self-driving cars, trucks, ships, ultimately planes, certainly trains, you need to have a diverse set of people with a diverse set of skills. Building a car in the old days, you needed mechanical engineers, petrochemical engineers, electrical engineers, maybe some industrial designers. Now you need, whole software teams to do the in-vehicle infotainment type systems. And we're soon going to need people who not only can understand the world of AI, but ethicists to come in, because now you have a one-ton machine under the control of an AI. And it's going to, at some point, have to make ethical decisions. Do I drive up the curve and mow down those 3 people? Do I have to swerve somehow to avoid this action that's about to happen? I've got a split second. Or do I drive into the oncoming traffic? Or do I sacrifice myself and my driver by driving into the tree over there? These types of ethical problems are ones that are knotty, and it's going to require engineers to talk with ethicists, philosophers. So having people who can bridge those domains, who can have a conversation. When I worked at Intel, we had a lot of social scientists, ethnographers, cultural anthropologists, people who deeply understood people and the way they lived their lives, working with engineers trying to solve human problems. Trying to get those 2 groups of people to talk to each other was quite difficult to begin with. First of all, they didn't understand each other's language, and fundamentally, they didn't respect each other. The engineers thought that the social scientists were all foo-foo-la-la people who didn't know anything about real engineering, and the social scientists thought the engineers were all knuckle draggers. And so what had to happen is they had to understand each other and ultimately build mutual respect. And so that is what is going to, we need to help people build mutual respect in the workplace, to have respect for each other's backgrounds and expertise and not belittle it. And that happens all too often in the workplace. So I see this not happening nearly as much in the younger generation. I think there is much more openness to people being different, having different expertise and having respect for that. So we have to encourage and continue to build upon that. There's one other vector of diversity that I want to introduce you today, which is, yes, we have to work with people with different backgrounds, age, gender, race. Of course we do. We have to be inclusive. But we also now need to think about a new vector of diversity, which is that humans are also now going to be working with non-humans. And that takes me to the third important dimension of the future of work, which is augmented work. Now, to understand where we're going with this, it's important to think about where we've come from. So if you go back before the Industrial Revolution, most people worked the land. It was backbreaking work. You were lucky to live to the age of 40. So I'd be long dead by now. Some of the other people on this call would be too. And it was a pretty miserable, tough existence. You worked 10, 12 hours a day, and not a fun time to be alive necessarily. And you were measured based on your physical strength, your stamina, and your technique. And that was really what differentiated you in your ability to be successful in that kind of a world. With the Industrial Revolution, we created mechanical muscles, the ability to replace human strength with machines. And that enabled us to move most people off the land and move them into factories and offices. And the quality of life went shooting up. And we moved into the knowledge era of work by creating those mechanical muscles. And you're measured here based on your knowledge, your expertise, your network and your ability to gather information from others, your ability to collaborate with others. It didn't mean that the physical world of work moved away. We still have many people who work in physical work, construction, manufacturing, and so on, but they tend to work in collaboration with mechanical machines that extend their reach and strength and so on. So we made this leap into the knowledge era, which generated huge amounts of wealth, improved the quality of life and the standard of living and the life expectancy of many, many people on Earth. But we are now about to create something new. And we are in the process now of building not mechanical muscles, but mechanical minds. With the advent of AI and the explosion in capability of AI since around the 2010, 2011 timeframe, we are now firmly moving into this new era of work. Now, what that means is the way we all work is going to be different. So if you're just starting your career, you're going to be starting in this augmented era, which is pretty exciting. I hope to play that out for you in the next few minutes. So let's talk about what do I mean by the augmented era of work. I'm talking about technologies that collaborate with us, that can augment our senses, that can augment our thinking, and augment every capability that humans have. And these are technologies that won't replace us. They elevate our abilities. They help us to do more. So you need to think about automation versus augmentation, and we'll come to some thoughts on what that means in a few minutes. So this is an example I'm showing you here of a company called See-Through, the letter C and then THRU. They have developed a visualization system that goes into a firefighter's helmet that helps them to see in smoke. And it's using lots of graphics processing technology to take the image in, find the edges, and visualize that for the firefighter. In tests, this is allowing the firefighter with this sort of X-ray vision to enter a building, do what they need to do, and get out, saving perhaps a human being or a pet or whatever it might be, 5 times faster than without using this system. So augmenting our senses. And there are many other examples in this realm too. You also see physical augmentation using robotics and artificial intelligence and sensors. That's 3 technologies of the 6 I'm going to talk to you about today, to build these exoskeletons. Exoskeletons are already in use on the Ford production line for people who work underneath cars and repeatedly drilling up and in like that. But these sophisticated exoskeletons are incredibly impressive. This is one you see with this guy now can lift to a 200-pound weight without even thinking about it. There are bigger, beastier ones that are being developed to lift 1,000 pounds of weight. So augmenting our strength and stamina. You also see a new category of robots called Cobots, collaborative robots that are designed to work alongside a human being. So for a long time, robots were trapped in cages building cars. The reason they were trapped inside cages is that they were dumb, they couldn't see, and they couldn't safely be in the same space as humans. These cobots have sensing capabilities, and they use AI and a number of sophisticated mechanical methods to make sure they can't hurt a human nearby. So they're being designed to work specifically to work in partnership with humans, to augment our dexterity and endurance, to do repetitive things on our behalf, so to start working with us as teammates. So when you think about the augmented work era, we now need to start thinking about tools in a different way. It used to be if you had a hammer, you pick it up, you bang in a nail, put down the hammer. Hammer doesn't do much once you put it down. It's completely subordinate to us. These new tools will start to feel less like tools and more like teammates that work alongside us and gain our respect and start to work as co-workers. AI is also being used to augment people's intuition. There are a number of AIs, for example, that are being deployed in the real estate sector. There's a company called First.io. First has built an AI which looks, a real estate agent can use to look through their Rolodex, essentially. Actually, if you're 18, 19, you have no idea what a Rolodex is. Let me explain. Your contacts list, all the people that you've worked with before, all your customers. So thinking about which customers are likely in the market to buy a house again. So it pulls all this data together, publicly available data, and builds a prediction on which of a real estate agent's previous customers are likely in the market for a new home, and allows them to reach out at just the right time. It is scarily accurate. So what this is doing is augmenting a real estate agent's intuition to help them decide exactly when they should reach out to a client and win their business. You also see AIs being used to augment judgment. There are a number of AIs that have been developed to help movie moguls make green light decision on movies. And in a test with an AI that looked at scripts, so all they do is they ingest movie scripts, and they look at those scripts and they make predictions on whether a movie will be successful in the box office or not. In tests based on a set of movie scripts from 2015 and 2016, the AI outperformed the best movie mogul, the best human movie mogul, significantly. And it was able to call nearly all of the ones that were successful and call all of the ones that were bombs. So what these tools are now able to do is not just predict which movies will be successful and which won't. They're even as granular as being able to say, this movie's opening weekend will be. And if you launch this movie in China, this is the box office you'll get, this is what you'll get in Malaysia, this is what you'll get in Africa, this is what you'll get in Europe, so that you can plan your box office, your release schedule. Incredibly powerful tools that are augmenting the judgment and decision-making skills of these movie executives. You also see AI being used to augment human creativity and imagination. Tools from Autodesk, the big computer-aided design company, are being infused with artificial intelligence with a technique called generative design. What generative design does is it takes the design done by the human, whether it is an architectural design, an engineering design, office layout, doesn't matter. It takes that initial design and then riffs on it. And it comes up with hundreds or thousands of alternative options to that design, building on it, and then presents those to the designer. And it puts all of those designs through simulation and is able to say to the designer, hey, if you tweak the design this way, it would, the product would be 3% lighter, or 10% increased tensile strength, or might be 15 cents cheaper to make. So what you have is this collaboration between machine intelligence and human intelligence, and the outcome, the result, is something that neither the machine nor the human could have designed on their own. Now, initially, when Autodesk brought these tools out, they expected that designers would report that they were more productive, that they got more designs done in a given month. They found that was true. But what surprised them is that designers, everyone that tried this, they all came back and said, this helps me to be more creative. It fuels my imagination because it helps me explore a design space of hundreds or thousands of options. Whereas normally I would only be able to maybe do 3 to 5 different designs and then pick the best one. I'm able to be much more creative and explore a much wider creative space. So just one example of AI being used to augment human creativity and imagination. I think this type of technology will show up in all manner of our jobs in the future, with AI assistants there to help us to do our jobs better. I mean, you're even seeing this today, right? I mean, every one of you, I'm sure, has a smartphone of some kind, and you've probably all used it to ask a question, to augment your knowledge, to help you to get some insight that you needed, to ask a simple question or a complex question. Over time, these AIs are going to get better. If you look at what Google Duplex is doing, for example, the ability to now outsource actions, to have these AIs run errands for you, to make bookings, to organize parties, to make you an appointment, to set up a meeting schedule. So you're going to start to see these AIs get bigger and better and more capable, so we can start to outsource and lean on these, and every one of us will be able to have a personal assistant. You won't have to be an executive anymore to have your own assistant. Every one of us will. So where does this go? Well, we're moving into a new era of computing. I think it's important we all recognize that. So if I think about, I mean, you can slice up the history of computing any way you like. This is one that happens to work for me, and I think illustrates where we're going forward. The first era of personal computing I would characterize as the PC and web era, where you had a browser, you had a big fat computer that sat on your desk. Some of you are probably not even old enough to remember that. Good for you. Because we're now firmly in the second era of personal computing, which is the mobile and cloud era, where we have smartphones, we have tablets, even PCs start to look like big giant tablets with keyboards attached to them. And cloud computing capability enables innovators to stand up new capabilities in the cloud very, very rapidly, improving time to innovation. So because of the intimacy that people have with these devices, they go with them everywhere they go. It's opened up all sorts of opportunities for innovation and to solve many more business problems and problems for people. We are now entering what I think is the third era of personal computing, where computing gets even more personal, it gets even closer to us, and we're building much more intimate links between the physical world around us and the digital world that we know increases in capability constantly. And I'm seeing this increasingly referred to as the spatial computing era. Now, I've drawn the icon here of an augmented reality headset, but there are 5 other technologies that are part of this era that help us to make these deep connections between the physical world and the digital world. So let me quickly run you through them. These are all technologies that are explored in significant detail in my book, which I hope you will all enjoy reading. But to run through them quickly. So it's blockchain technology, which allows you to tokenize assets, to streamline business processes, and to fundamentally bring trust into a world, into a digital world, so you can start to map the digital and physical worlds more accurately. 5G and satellite connection technology to connect all of this stuff together and allow us to connect everything and everyone everywhere on Earth. AI technology that I've already talked about a little bit already. AI is the best way to think about this, and without going to the bits and bytes of how neural networks work, the important thing to know is artificial intelligence lets us solve problems we don't know how to solve ourselves. Because instead of building an AI, building a digital solution, which is a program where we include rules and we tell the computer how to solve a problem, AI learns how to solve problems by giving it examples. So at its fundamental core, AI allows us to solve problems we don't know how to solve ourselves, and that's a huge breakthrough. Sensors enable us to connect the physical and the digital worlds together, so the digital world knows what's happening in our physical world and then is able to act upon that to make the world more responsive to human needs. And we're on a track to, by the end of this decade, so by 2030, to have a world filled with 100 trillion sensors. Everything from cameras to temperature sensors to even Wi-Fi hotspots can be a sensor. So 12,000 sensors per person for everybody on Earth. And then finally, robotics. So autonomous machines, robots, cobots, drones, even passenger drones. So electric vehicles, electric takeoff and landing vehicles. So those are the 6 technologies. You can combine them in creative ways. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But this is the spatial computing era. It allows you to solve many problems you could not solve with the previous 2 eras of computing. And for those of you just entering the world of IT, this is your new canvas from which you get to paint, creatively combining these technologies to solve problems that no one was able to solve before. This is a super exciting time to be entering the IT workforce. And for those of us who are in IT, it's a shot in the arm of excitement to start really solving problems we've not been able to solve for all of our careers. So what does this stuff look like? Well, let's play a little bit on this augmented reality world. So if you've tried virtual reality, you know it's an amazing experience. You feel like you're transported somewhere else. With augmented reality, instead of being cut off from the physical world, which is the way you feel with virtual reality, you still are connected. You can still see the physical world around you, but now digital objects and information are overlaid in that world. And it enables you to think about work in a completely different way. And I think it's going to lead to a new type of augmented or hybrid worker, because the main interface for human beings is our eyes. That's probably the most important sense that we have to help us navigate, particularly through the world of work. And so being able to augment that and have that as the primary interface where an AI can talk to a human being and collaborate with them at that point, I think is a very powerful concept. And you see Microsoft's Hololens being demonstrated in this shot here as a guy is visualizing some work that he has to do. Microsoft, with their Dynamics package, is starting to think about how to create work instructions so that workers, instead of having to go on a 12-week training course to learn how to build an engine or repair a robot, now can put on a pair of glasses and they're productive day one. They can be trained in real time as they go. What you're creating here is a hybrid worker, which is a combination of human experience, intelligence, dexterity, and presence, and machine intelligence, and all of the access to the richness in the cloud. If you've watched the movie The Matrix, where they learn to fly a helicopter by, shoving this thing in the back of their head, it's kind of like that, only without having to have a spike shoved in the back of your skull. So as we move into this era of augmented and hybrid workers, we can start to think about work in a very different way, and to be able to gain skills and to collaborate with AIs to gain new abilities over time. This is particularly interesting in the world where you have workers who need to operate hands-free. And about 80% of workers work in either hands-free or fast-moving mobile environments. Think people who are restaurant workers or retail workers, for example. And I'm just noticing this guy's nose is hanging out the top of his mask. That's not right. We all know that by now. Naughty boy. Okay. Anyway, so for people who are not able to touch, this is the next generation of computing where you're not touching, you're purely using gesture. Your visual interface is sprayed on top of the physical world, and using gesture and voice to interact with programs. And examples in the medical world, this is a company called Augmetics. They're using augmented reality to overlay imaging on top of the patient. Traditionally, I have a lot of surgeon friends, when they go into surgery, they always have imaging, whether it's x-rays or CT or whatever it might be. And they look at the patient and they look up and away at the imaging. And they look back at the patient, up and away at the imaging, back at the patient. And they're trying to overlay it in their minds and figure out roughly where that image would lay on the patient. The Augmetics platform completely overlays it, essentially giving that surgeon x-ray vision. And you're seeing this type of capability used in all kinds of industries. This is Volvo deploying this as a trial on their manufacturing line for their SUVs. And various different engineering companies are starting to use this and use this to create rich interfaces. So if you have factory equipment, with switches and buttons and dials on it, now you can create much richer interfaces so that workers can interact with those pieces of equipment, set the controls on them, get information about their maintenance history, and so on. Just creates a whole new way of interfacing and operating in the work environment. Even in construction, which has traditionally been a very physical, I don't want to be cruel to it because construction is just an amazing industry, but in some ways it has been quite backward. It has been slow to adopt technology, and that was not their fault. It was because the technology wasn't ready for what they do. Now that we have this spatial computing era, I think you're going to see industries like construction adopt it wholesale. They still take the building information model, which is the 3D model of a building, and then they print them out as 2D blueprints that they carry onto the site with them. It's kind of crazy. Now, which is easier to interpret as you try and figure out where to install the HVAC system and the plumbing system and electrical? Is it to look at a diagram like this, or is it to see it overlaid on top of the building like this, so you know exactly where things are supposed to go? So it's a completely different way about thinking about 3D space and how we interact with it and how we help workers to be more productive in that type of environment. Now, a lot of this has been predicated on this notion of a headset, which, as you can see in this image, it's kind of sexy, but kind of not. Big, bulky, it's going to get in the way of what we're doing, and it's not particularly comfortable or attractive for wearing for long periods of time. So where does it go ultimately? Now, this is getting into the futury stuff, but hey, I'm a futurist, I'm supposed to do that. This is where we're heading. There are companies who really are working on this stuff to put displays into contact lenses so that we can start to bring augmentation without having to wear these heavy headsets. And there's companies like Mojo who are building these roadmaps. I'm not going to validate the accuracy of these roadmaps, but it's where people are thinking this would go in the future. A lens you put on that augments your view of the world and enables you to have this whole new set of information and guidance on what to do. So completely changing the way that not only we work, but the way that we interact with the physical world around us. So what does all this mean, to wrap this up and then take some Q&A maybe? Where do we go from here? Well, what this means is we're going to rethink the way that we do work. And traditionally, there are companies have these business processes where there's a bunch of tasks you have to do one after the other, whether it's the payroll task or the customer acquisition task or a manufacturing task. There are all these business processes with individual tasks. What we have to do now is ask the tough question. for all of these tasks in each of these business processes, which is best done by a human and which is best done by either a robot or an AI? And how do we build high functioning teams of people collaborating together in that fashion? And what's the handoff, the graceful handoff between each of those three? And the reason you do that is each has different strengths and weaknesses. You use robots when you need strength, stamina, and you're doing something very repetitive, or it's a very dangerous environment. You use an AI when you're looking for patterns in data, when you're trying to handle highly complex information with millions of data points perhaps, when you're trying to remove bias from something or make predictions about what might happen next. And then humans are still going to be important in the workforce. I don't want any of you to take anything away from this that thinks that humans are less valuable in the workplace of the future. That is absolutely not true. As you can see, the things that we have going for us in our column, there's more of them than the other two columns. So good for us. Oops, it's all right. Let me go back before I reveal what this next slide says. Many of you may come to be worried about the role of robots and AIs and slowly taking away human work. In some cases, that will be true. I do not believe there is a long-term career prospect for many people in the truck driving industry. There will still be some, but there will be some jobs that for sure go away. And we're going to retrain, to upskill, reskill people to help them keep participating in the workforce. But for the majority of people, these technologies are going to show up in our lives and help to elevate our work. And this is borne out by a study that was done a couple of years ago, that I want to share the outcome with you. This was published in Harvard Business Review. It was a study done by Accenture. So this is not small potatoes people. Here's what they found. Those companies that deploy AI mainly to displace employees will see only short-term productivity gains. Firms achieve the most significant performance improvements when humans and machines work together. That's why I think we are now moving into the augmented era of work, where all of us will be working in close partnership with machines of one kind or another. And that experience will not be miserable. That experience will be great, because the machines will take away the stuff we don't want to do, and they will help us to feel more creative, more imaginative, to make higher quality decisions, to have better intuition, and so on. So these are the 6 technologies that I think make all that happen, that can be combined creatively to solve problems in new ways, and that will reshape the future of work. I gave you a little glimpse into each of those today. They're explored in much more detail in my book, which I hope you will all enjoy. I hope you'll all take the time to read it. It is not written as at a level where it's designed for engineers, but it is designed for all people, and it explains what business problems or what societal problems we might solve with creative combination of these technologies. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, on my website, this is available. If you want to go, you can download this. You just sign up and it'll send you a copy. This is a template that I use as a way to think through how you use these technologies to creatively solve problems, to solve business problems. You can see on the left side of this matrix, these are the 5 different business, big high-level business challenges that businesses have, and then you see the technologies across the top. And at the intersection of each of these is an opportunity to bring innovation into some aspect of business. What we talked about today is that middle row, enhancing the worker experience. But there are many other rows and columns here to explore, and a lot of this is covered in the book. So I think fundamentally, the opportunity here ahead of us is phenomenal. And the question we need to ask ourselves is this: can we use technology to elevate human work? Not to replace it, although that will happen in some cases, but how do we use this to make work more rewarding, more exciting, more interesting, more meaningful for us all? I personally think that the future of work is really exciting, because not only will it be augmented, but we're going to be working in diverse groups of people who are really interesting and we can all learn from on a constant basis. And we have the opportunity for some of us to do this from a beach or a bar or atop of a mountain or wherever works for you. or if you like, you can still be coming into offices if that's what your jam is. So the opportunity here is great. I hope this was stimulating for you, gave you something to think about. If you ever need to get a hold of me, there's my contact details. That's how you can follow me on the socials. And now I will stop talking and see what questions we might have.
All right. Thank you so much for this insightful analysis of where the market's going and what the future work would look like. I have a bunch of questions coming through, so I'll just go down. The first one is the wild one, right? When will AI start thinking for itself and create a Terminator-like situation? Is it a realistic fear?
Is it a realistic fear? No. I mean, we of course need to think about it. With great power comes great responsibility, and AI is a very powerful technology, and I understand why Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and others have said we need to be careful. But you need to understand where AI is today. You know, all AI today, there's narrow AI, which is an AI that can do something equivalent to the capabilities of a human or better, but only do one thing. So think, you know, spam filters, chess AIs, the AI that listens to your voice. I can't say her name because she's listening right there now and she'll wake up if I say it, but you know what I'm talking about. Each of those AIs, you know, your spam filter AI cannot play chess. A chess AI cannot do credit reports. A credit report AI cannot filter spam. So they're very narrow focus. That's all AIs today are narrow AIs. Where we need to start worrying is once we get to AGI, which is general AI, which is where you create an AI that has the capabilities on all skills that are equivalent to that of a human. And beyond that is super AI, which is where you have an AI which is better at all things than a human. That could be 1% better or 1,000,000 times better. Am I worried that we're going to have Terminator stomping on human skulls anytime soon? No. And I think we need to be careful not to move slowly with AI deployment because we're fearful. We should be cautious, yes, but not fearful, because there's a good chance that somebody listening to this right now will either have their lives saved or the life of their children or grandchildren, depending on how old you are, saved by an AI, which has helped to develop a drug in collaboration with human pharmaceutical researchers that saves their life. So AI is a very powerful tool. We need to be cautious to use it for good, but I think we need to not be paralyzed by fear because we watched a James Cameron movie or two.
All right, thanks. Next question. How do you see quantum computing disrupting current solutions?
Okay, fine question. Let me answer that by saying I didn't include it in my 6 technologies in the book for a reason. It is a very powerful technology. It is still nascent. It is not going to be something that you have in your cell phone this decade. And my focus is always on the next decade. I find that's the most profitable, and I mean profitable in terms of rewarding of thinking, not profitable in terms of dollars, the most profitable time frame for thinking about the future. Quantum computing, I think, will have broader impact in the 2030s. In the interim, I think it does have some interesting applications in cryptography, probably in drug research, understanding how complex molecules interact with each other. You know, there are some knotty scientific problems that that quantum computing can play a role in, but for the vast majority of businesses and for the vast majority of us, it is not a technology that is going to solve a lot of the big problems that we face today.
Okay. So related question, if AI is making or helping make decisions, what can we do to prevent AI from perpetuating racial gender bias?
Fabulous question, and it is the question to ask, because there have been a number of examples, which I've included in my book, which I hope you'll enjoy, about how AIs have picked up human bias. It's not the AI's fault. It's that they were trained on human data, and that data inherently reflects existing human bias. I'll give you an example. So Amazon built an AI because they were getting so many resumes to filter the resumes and decide which one should go to an interview and which one should get the thank you very much, but no thanks. And they did that by training the AI with all of the resumes they had received and which ones went on to be successful candidates and which ones were rejected. What they found out when they started feeding this AI with new resumes is it was biased against women. Now, that was not because it was a naughty AI. It was because the AI was reflecting historical hiring practices at Amazon. So this AI can be a mirror in which we can see our own behaviors. So Amazon never put that into production and quickly withdrew it. There are examples where you can do it right. So the New Jersey bail system, they had a bail bonds system they wanted to get rid of because they were keeping a lot of people in jail just because they couldn't meet bond, not because they were a risk to society or something. So they instituted an AI system to make a judgment and make a prediction over whether somebody who had been picked up by the police could be released, whether they would be safe to release or not. And whether they were likely to show up for their court date and whether they were likely to be a risk to society. That AI was very carefully trained to not have a gender or race bias. And you have to be incredibly careful with what you reveal, because not only do they, of course, remove what the gender and race of somebody was, but they also had to remove their names because names are a proxy for gender. And they also removed home address because of the way cities are structured in the United States in particular, address can be a proxy for race. And so they had to be very careful with the way they scrubbed the data to build an AI that was removed of human bias. So it can be done, but we have to be incredibly careful how we train AIs so they are better than us. And I think we need to set our expectations that AIs, the way we want our children to be better than us, to grow up to be better than we were, we should want that for our AIs too. We should aspire that our AIs are better than humans, because it turns out we're a lousy bunch of people sometimes.
Thank you. The next question, IT leaders need to be ready for the new world. How can we get them ready? Please share your thoughts on what they need to do to be ready.
That's a big question. So I think, first of all, I talked about pie-shaped people. I think being an IT person, pure IT person, knowing how to code, for example, knowing how to design a system, knowing how to build a platform, whatever it might be, that will not be enough at some point. And if you really want to be valuable, yeah, get those skills, of course. Those STEM skills and engineering skills are going to be vital for us to help to build out the world and that digital world that we know holds so much promise and hope for us. But having additional skills where you can not necessarily understand a domain, like becoming an MD and understanding AI, the example I gave earlier, but at least understanding business, understanding the realities of business and how problems get solved, what those business problems are. The more capable you are of understanding the application of the technology that you build, rather than just how to build it, the more valuable you will be. And that's kind of why I wrote the book, is to help people get that sensibility to understand what are the business problems they can solve, and to get inspired by examples of people doing this in a wide range of industries. So that would probably be my number one thing, is build your business technology innovation acumen.
There's a related question, but further down the pipeline, this information need to be shared with schools and universities so that they can start teaching students to be ready for the future. We are still teaching 3 C's in the school. Thoughts?
Yeah, education probably needs some modernization. I'll be kind. both in pedagogy. I can never say that word. You know the word I mean. The way we teach people, and what we teach them. The way we teach people is largely the same way we have taught people for at least a couple of hundred years. You know, the modern education system we have today is based on a system we built in the Industrial Revolution era to help people transition from working on the fields to working in factories and offices. You know, it's a lecturer standing at the front of a room with, you know, used to be a blackboard, now it's a whiteboard. Maybe it's an overhead projector, and then now it's a projector with a digital display. You know, and here we are with the latest in technology, but it's fundamentally the same thing. How do we use the technology that will displace some people from jobs in the coming years to upskill and reskill those people at low cost? You know, the cost of education is a barrier, and it needn't be. If we were to redesign an educational system today from scratch, we would not design it the way it is today, where teaching talent is trapped inside physical locations. And I only get to talk with the teachers in my school because they happen to be also in my school. Why can't I get access to the very best teacher on the planet in that topic that doesn't happen to be physically in the same space as me? So I think if we were to redesign education for the internet era, we would design it completely differently than we have it today. And if we want to meet the challenges of the 21st century, we are going to need to educate people at much lower cost, embrace experiential learning, and teach them a different curriculum. I don't want to say completely different, but a modified curriculum that helps them build the skills that they need to remain relevant in the workforce of the future. That's going to mean the 4 C's, so collaboration, creativity, communication, and critical thinking, but also empathy, entrepreneurial skills, agility, you know, almost the soft skills, but you know, practical skills that help them function in the workplaces of the future. So we're going to have to embrace all of that, and it's going to be a tough transformation for the educational world, who are incredibly traditional. You know, they operate by tradition, but if they get it right, their opportunity is to not just have perhaps I'm talking about higher ed now, having a 3 or 4 year relationship with a student. And then, you know, the only relationship they have is when they hit them up for donations as an alumni to build a new building or whatever. But to have a lifelong relationship with that student, so that they come back to the university or college, whatever it might be, for their ongoing educational needs as they evolve over their career. So it's a different way of thinking about it, and it's a long topic, but that would be my high-level answer.
So there's along the same line, there's another question here. Technology and current environment of COVID has created digital divide. Are we moving towards a wider digital divide?
Oh, yes. In the short term, yes, I think we are. It's something I work with the state of Oregon to help them think through these things, particularly through the Oregon Business Council. This was something that's been highlighted for a while, is the digital divide, and how do we make sure that people have access? Because in the time of COVID, we've accelerated this move to remote access to services, whether that is educational services, telehealth services, shopping services. Having a digital connection and having the device to connect to that digital connection. You know, if you are a kid in a wealthy family in central Portland, you know, you probably got access to broadband. You may even have your own laptop or Chromebook, whatever it might be, and you can do your lessons. It's not ideal, but it's fine. If you are working, you know, you're a kid of a poor family, maybe a single mother who's really trying to make ends meet, you don't have broadband in your house. You are probably relying on borrowing your mum's cell phone to try and access your lessons over, you know, on a smartphone screen over the cellular connection, which may or may not be good. So that divide has definitely broadened as we have accelerated the transition to digital. What it means is we need to start to make digital broadband access and device access more, to democratize it and make it easier. Now, we can drive down the prices of the devices. That's been happening over time, but we probably need government intervention to try and to recognize that fact and to wholesale embrace these satellite networks I was talking about, to make sure that we have broadband available to everyone wherever they are. So you're not penalized for being in a rural location.
I think there's another similar question here. Companies like Microsoft, Xbox, Sony, PlayStation are way ahead in making use of technologies like AI in building immersive and engaging games. I wonder how good it could be if the big companies use similar technologies to build tools for creating engaging learning experience for our students. Do you see this happening anytime soon?
So the fundamental issue there is money.
Yes.
And there's, and I say this as, I have a funny accent, but I am an American citizen now. So I can say this as a critique of our country. Our country has not prioritized education for at least 40 years. It has been underinvested. The fact that teachers have to, buy supplies out of their own pocket for our schools is just abhorrent. And it says we haven't valued, as a society, we have not properly valued education. And people do value video games. I mean, people will drop $50, $60 without thinking for a great video game. And, the video game industry sailed past Hollywood box office, 10 years ago, and is now double or triple what Hollywood makes. So there's plenty of money flowing into that, and there's plenty of creativity, and there's a great use of technology. The person who asked the question is right. What if we turn those capabilities to solving the education gap, which is, how do we deliver a quality education that is accessible and affordable to all? It will only happen if we prioritize it as a society and say that it is important and are willing to spend money on that. And that's going to mean focusing some of our tax dollars on funding some of that.
How would you introduce technologies like Hololens to accompany work processes?
Hololens, yes. So Hololens, still expensive. HoloLens 2, it's still $3,000 for developer edition. It's still at developer stage. A couple of years from now, maybe 2-3 years from now, I think we'll start seeing the first round of products that are affordable to be deployed at scale. And you'll start to see people actually doing that. If you are a company that is interested in that world, and you think that it might be applicable to you, because it's not applicable to all industries, but it's certainly applicable in manufacturing and healthcare and a number of other sectors. If you are one of those companies, I would encourage you to start experimenting with it now. Get one of those HoloLens headsets. Start playing with the applications that are available. Start thinking about what will be possible for your business when that technology is matured, because it's still not quite there in terms of its capabilities, and it's still limited on the field of view that you have, and a few other limitations in terms of battery life and weight and that sort of thing. But as the technology matures, you need to be ready for it, which means you need to have thought this stuff through. Where would this be applicable? Which business processes would it help to streamline or accelerate? How would it help you to augment the capabilities of your workers? And just start experimenting with that now. And if you don't want to spring for a $3,500 HoloLens headset, the latest phones, they include augmented reality capability. You can start to do some pretty limited, it's limited experimentation using these types of devices, seeing how augmentation might work and seeing what problems it might solve for you.
I think we have come to our way. We're going to conclude the evening. Thank you so much for a very exciting presentation, and thank you to all the people who joined us this evening. And for a reminder for those of you who might want to get a copy of the book, it's first come, first serve. Send me a note, and the students go see your professor, go bug them, and I need to get all the 130 books that I ordered out of my garage that has been sitting there since March. Because this is supposed to be a live event, and I was supposed to get the books to everybody, and people would have an opportunity to get him to sign. Well, I guess you can do the virtual signature, right? Right. And anyway, with that, thank you all for joining, and have a very good evening.